Python list class is one of the most useful classes within Python. It allows you to create a mutable sequence of elements. As usual, I have my Python shell on the left side of my screen where I will run my program that's shown on the right side of my screen. This time it's list_demo.py. I'll go ahead and execute that by using the run menu, run module command. If you want to create a list object, there's the list function that will construct one for you. It'll be an empty list. You can see what an empty list looks like. It's just a pair of square brackets. You could also create a list based upon the contents of a string. And if you look at what happens, that list then will have each individual character that was in the string as an element within the list. You could create a list based upon tuples. Tuples have parentheses around some sequence of elements. In this case, I've got two tuples, really. A tuple which is 1, 2, containing the tuple 3, 5, 7, where 3, 5, 7 is its own tuple inside of the other tuple. And so what happens when that is used as the argument to the list function, we get a list object with the square brackets that contains a couple of number elements and one tuple element. You can also just use the empty square brackets in order to create an empty list on your own. So the same way that Python represents the empty list, you can use to create one. You can also use this list syntax to create your own lists, where if you type a square bracket and then have elements comma separated like numbers or strings, possibly other lists or tuples or other objects, then that will create a list. And we can see this list syn for syntax that shows this new list. For testing membership, kind of like testing membership in a string, you can use the in operator. So we could see if the string A is in the list SYN, and we see A is in there. So the A in list syn returns a true value. Likewise, you can use not in to test to see whether an element is not present. In this case, 1 is not in list syn, and looking at list syn, it's not there. So 1 not in list syn returns true. If you want to modify a list, this is one of the things that makes it unique compared to the tuples that we'll look at later. You can use methods like append, extend, insert, pop, remove, and clear. With append, you'll normally add one element at the end. So our original empty list now contains an element 5. You could also append one list onto another, although then you'll end up with a list inside of a list, which may not be what you want. If you want to remove an element like that list within the list, the pop method of a list will remove the last element and it returns a value, which you could store in a variable like this, last elem. And you can see that that last elem is the list of 6 and 7 that previously was inside the other list. You can also see the other list, after having executed that pop, no longer contains those elements. It only has the element 5. Typically, if you want to add the elements of one list to another, but not create a list within a list, then you can use the extend method. In this case, that list is extended with the list 6, 7. So those elements that were in that extra list are just added as extra elements to the original list. With the pop method, you can specify an index. Normally it returns the last element, but if we use an index value of 0, then it would remove the first element. And again, pop method returns a value which you could store in a variable like this. So in this case, the first element is 5, and we see that that is no longer contained within the list. Another way to add elements to a list is to use the insert method. If you insert with an index position of 0, that new element will be at the beginning of the list. And so we see in this case the 10 that has been inserted before the 6 and 7 in that list. If you wanted to insert somewhere else, perhaps at index position 3, you could add an element in that position. In this case, you can see that 100 is inserted at index position 3, where index positions start at 0 and then 1, 2, and we see this one was put in at 3. Instead of pop, which moves by an index position, you can use the remove method, which works with a value. So removing the value 7 that's in that list shows then that the list no longer contains that 7. You could also get rid of all the elements if you wanted in a list by using the list method clear. And you can see the empty list is empty once again. Since we're going to be doing some various functions with list str, we'll go ahead and display that list again. You can see it's got the strings that made up the larger string hello as individual elements. Like when working with strings, you can use a min function to find the minimum value of that, which in this case would be E, because it's lowest in alphabetical order. Or you could use max to find the largest element in that list, which would be O, the thing closest to the end of the alphabet. To create a copy that is sorted, you can use the sorted function. The sorted function, however, only is a copy. It does not affect the original list. So the sorted list str shows the elements from lowest to highest alphabetical order, although you can see the original string is still unaltered. If you use the sort method, however, the sort method will change the original string, as we see in this example here. There's also a reverse method, which basically flips the head to the tail, which is to say that what was the first element becomes the last element, and vice versa. So we see that hello has been reversed in alphabetical order from highest alphabetical to lowest alphabetical. A couple other methods that are useful with the list. You could use count to determine how many times a particular element may be present within that list. In this case, counting the number of O's would tell us that there's 1 O. You can use the index method to determine at what position within that list that element appears. Don't use that method unless you're sure that the element is present, or else you'll get an error. In this case, the O has already been found at least one time, and we can find then its index position at 0 at the beginning of the list. One last thing that we might mention is that you can always print or display what the length of a list might be. Using the len function applied to your list object, we'll end up displaying the length or the total number of elements within that list. So I will save my changes with Control S, hit F5, run this again, and there we see the list length is 5 now.